The blood came in the middle of the night, and Zelda Sanders knew, before she even opened her eyes, that everything had changed forever. She woke Quinn Whitmore with trembling hands on his shoulder, her nightgown soaked through, and the look of horror on his face told her that this would be the moment their marriage began to crack apart. He fetched the doctor from town, riding hard through the darkness of that April night in 1882. But by the time Dr. Patterson arrived at the Whitmore Ranch outside Desdemona, Texas, there was nothing left to save. The baby was gone, barely 3 months along, and Zelda felt like something vital had been ripped out of her chest along with it. The physical pain was bad enough, cramping and bleeding that left her weak and hollow, but the look in Quinn's eyes was worse. He stood at the foot of their bed, hat in his hands, twisting the brim like he wanted to wring water from it, and he would not meet her gaze. "Doctor." Patterson gave her laudanum for the pain, and told her she needed to rest, that these things happened sometimes, that she was young and there would be other babies. But Zelda saw the truth in the set of Quinn's shoulders as he walked the doctor out, heard it in the hushed conversation they had on the porch that she was not meant to overhear. His mother arrived the next morning with his sister Clara, both dressed in dark colors like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they were. Margaret Whitmore swept into the bedroom with the force of a dust storm, her sharp features arranged in an expression that might have been concern if her eyes had held any warmth. "Well," Margaret said, looking down at Zelda where she lay pale and exhausted against the pillows. "I suppose these things happen when a woman does not take proper care of herself." Zelda felt the words like a slap. "I did everything right. I was careful. Clearly not careful enough." Clara stood behind her mother, younger and prettier, but with the same hard set to her mouth. "Quinn told us you insisted on helping with the garden work just last week. What were you thinking, digging in the dirt in your condition?" "The doctor said light work was fine," Zelda whispered, but her voice had no strength behind it. Margaret pulled back the curtains with sharp, efficient movements, flooding the room with harsh morning sunlight that made Zelda's head ache. "Well, the doctor was wrong, was he not? Or perhaps you simply did not listen properly. I carried 3 children to term without incident because I understood the delicate nature of breeding. I rested as a woman should. I did not gallivant about pretending I could do a man's work." The unfairness of it burned in Zelda's throat, but she had no energy to fight. She turned her face to the wall and closed her eyes, feeling tears slip hot and silent down her cheeks. She heard Clara say something about weak constitutions running in some families, heard Margaret make a non-committal sound of agreement, and then they swept out of the room to go speak with Quinn about what was to be done now. For 3 days, Zelda lay in that bed, and for 3 days Margaret Whitmore ran the household with rigid disapproval radiating from every movement. She brought Zelda weak broth and dry toast, setting the trays down with barely concealed disdain, and made pointed comments about how some women were simply not built for the rigors of frontier life. Clara helped with the cooking and cleaning, but every task was performed with martyred sighs and meaningful glances toward the closed bedroom door where Zelda remained sequestered. Quinn came to see her in brief, uncomfortable visits. He would stand in the doorway, ask how she was feeling in a voice devoid of warmth, and leave again before she could answer properly. At night he slept in the spare room, and Zelda understood that he blamed her too. She had failed in the most basic duty of a wife, failed to carry his child, failed to give his parents the grandchild they had been anticipating. The grief was enormous inside her, but she had no one to share it with, no shoulder to cry on, no hand to hold in the darkness. On the 4th day, Margaret came in and announced that Zelda needed to get up and resume her duties. "Lying about will not change what happened," she said crisply. "The work still needs doing, and I cannot stay here forever managing your household for you." Zelda was still weak, still bleeding, still hollowed out with sorrow, but she forced herself to rise. She dressed in a clean house dress, braided her dark hair with shaking fingers, and came out to the kitchen where Margaret and Clara were drinking coffee at the table. They looked up at her with identical expressions of cold assessment. "You look pale," Clara observed. "Are you certain you are well enough to be up?" "I am fine," Zelda lied. "Well, you do not look fine." Margaret set down her cup with a sharp click of china on wood. "But I suppose we must work with what we have. There is bread to be made, and the chickens need feeding, and Quinn's shirts need mending. Best you start earning your keep again." Zelda wanted to scream that she had lost a baby, that she was grieving, that she needed time to heal both body and soul. But she swallowed the words and nodded, moving to the counter to begin preparing the bread dough. Her hands trembled as she measured flour, and when she reached for the salt, her vision swam with sudden dizziness. She gripped the counter edge, breathing hard, willing herself not to collapse. "Honestly," she heard Margaret say behind her, "such dramatics. My mother lost 4 babies between the living ones, and she never carried on like this." That evening Quinn came in from working the cattle, dusty and tired, and his mother cornered him immediately. Zelda was setting the table for supper, moving slowly because everything still hurt, and she heard every word of their conversation even though they spoke in low tones by the stove. "She is not strong, Quinn," Margaret said. "I hate to say it about your wife, but it is the truth. Look at her, barely able to stand after just a few days. When I lost your brother, God rest him, I was back on my feet the next day. A ranch wife needs to be made of sterner stuff." "She is doing her best, Mother," Quinn said, but his voice was uncertain, lacking conviction. "Is she, I wonder? Perhaps she is simply not suited to this life. Perhaps you married too hastily, chosen beauty over constitution. These are things a man must consider." Zelda's hands stilled on the plates. She stood frozen, waiting for Quinn to defend her, to tell his mother that her cruel words were out of line, that Zelda was his wife and he loved her. But Quinn said nothing, and in that silence Zelda felt the foundation of her marriage crumble to dust. Supper was a miserable affair. Zelda could barely eat, her stomach churning with grief and humiliation, while Margaret dominated the conversation with talk of neighbors and cattle prices, and how Clara's friend Rebecca had just delivered a healthy son, her 3rd child in 4 years. The implication hung heavy in the air. Some women could do what was required of them, and some could not. That night, Zelda lay alone in the bed she had shared with Quinn for the year of their marriage, staring into the darkness and feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Her parents were dead, killed by fever when she was 17, and she had no siblings, no family to turn to. Quinn had seemed like a gift from God when he had courted her, a handsome cowboy with kind eyes and a prosperous ranch. She had married him with joy in her heart, believing she had found a home and a partner for life. Now she understood how fragile that security had been, how quickly it could be stripped away. She cried silently into her pillow, muffling the sound so no one would hear, grieving for the baby she had lost and the husband who had turned away from her in her darkest hour. Margaret and Clara finally left 2 days later, and Zelda felt she could breathe again without their poisonous presence filling every room. But Quinn remained distant, speaking to her only when necessary, sleeping in the spare room, avoiding her eyes. He spent long hours out on the range, coming home after dark, eating the suppers she prepared in silence before disappearing again. The warmth they had shared was gone, replaced by a cold formality that cut deeper than any harsh word. A week after the miscarriage, Zelda was in the barn feeding the horses when she heard voices outside. Through the gap in the boards, she saw Quinn talking with his mother, who had returned for some reason, and the words carried clearly in the still morning air. "You need to think about the future," Margaret was saying. "If she cannot carry a child to term, what use is she? There are laws about such things, Quinn. Grounds for annulment. You are still a young man. You could start over with a woman who can give you sons." "Mother, I do not think with your heart, think with your head. She has proven herself inadequate to the task. Better to cut your losses now than waste years discovering she is barren. Talk to the lawyer in town. See what can be done." Zelda stood frozen in the dim barn, her hand still on the horse's neck, and felt her world shatter completely. Quinn was considering leaving her. After a year of marriage, after she had given him everything she had, after she had lost their child, he was thinking of casting her aside like a broken tool that no longer served its purpose. The grief was so enormous it stole her breath, left her gasping and dizzy. She stumbled out the back of the barn, not wanting them to know she had overheard, and found herself walking blindly away from the house. Her feet carried her across the scrubby Texas prairie, through the spring grass and wildflowers, until she reached the creek that marked the boundary between the Whitmore land and the neighboring property. There was a stand of cottonwood trees there, providing shade, and Zelda collapsed beneath them and let the tears come at last, great wrenching sobs that tore from her chest like they might rip her apart. She cried for her lost baby, for the marriage that was dying, for the loneliness and hurt and fear of an uncertain future. She cried until she had no tears left, until she was just sitting there hollow and empty and broken, staring at the water flowing past with no idea what to do next. "Madam." "Are you all right?" Zelda's head snapped up. A man stood a few yards away, concern evident on his weathered face. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn work clothes and a faded blue shirt, a hat pushed back on his head revealing sun-bleached brown hair. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the deep tan of someone who spent every day outdoors. His eyes were a surprising shade of gray, kind and worried as they studied her. "I am fine," Zelda said automatically, though her voice was wrecked from crying and her face was surely blotchy and swollen. "No offense, madam, but you do not look fine." He took a cautious step closer, moving slowly like he was approaching a spooked horse. "I am Quentin Walker. I work the cattle on the Morrison spread. Their land borders the Whitmore place here. I was checking fences and heard someone crying, thought maybe someone was hurt." "I am not hurt," Zelda said, though it was a lie. She was hurt in ways that would never show as bruises or blood. "I am sorry to have disturbed you. I will go." She started to stand, but her legs were unsteady and she swayed. Quentin moved quickly, catching her elbow to steady her. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. "Easy now," he said. "When is the last time you ate something?" Zelda could not remember. She had been picking at her food for days, her appetite gone. "I do not know. This morning, I think." "That is not good enough." Quentin guided her back down to sit on a fallen log, then moved to his horse, which was grazing nearby. He returned with a canteen and a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Here, drink some water and I have some biscuits and jerky. Not fancy, but it will help." Zelda wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but she was so tired and so empty that she just took the canteen with trembling hands and drank. The water was cool and good, and it helped settle her churning stomach. Quentin sat down on the log a respectful distance away and unwrapped the food, offering it without comment. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the creek burbling past and the wind rustling through the cottonwood leaves. Zelda forced herself to eat a biscuit, and then another, and gradually felt a tiny bit of strength returning to her limbs. Quentin did not ask questions, did not pry, just sat there with a calm patience that was like balm to her battered soul. Finally, because the silence felt too heavy and because she desperately needed anyone to talk to, Zelda heard herself speaking. "I lost a baby," she said quietly. "2 weeks ago, and my husband's family blames me. They think I did something wrong, that I am weak, that I am not good enough." Her voice broke. "And my husband believes them. He is talking to his mother about annulment, about replacing me with someone who can give him children." The words hung in the air between them, raw and painful. Zelda expected judgment, expected the same cold disapproval she had received from the Whitmores. But when she glanced at Quentin, his face showed only compassion and a quiet anger that was not directed at her. "That is cruel," he said simply. "Losing a child is grief enough without being blamed for it. My own mother lost 3 babies between me and my sister. It nearly destroyed her each time, but my father held her through it and told her it was not her fault, that God's ways were mysterious and sometimes heartbreaking. That is how a husband should act, not casting blame and certainly not talking of annulment." The kindness in his words broke something loose in Zelda's chest, and she began to cry again, helpless to stop it. Quentin hesitated for only a moment, then moved closer and, with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough cowboy exterior, put an arm around her shoulders. He did not try to shush her or tell her to stop. He just held her and let her cry, his presence solid and steady and safe. Zelda cried until she was empty again, and then she just leaned against him, exhausted, feeling the warmth of another human being who did not judge her, who did not find her lacking. Quentin's hand rubbed slow circles on her back, soothing, and she heard him murmur, "It is all right. You go ahead and cry all you need to. Sometimes that is the only thing that helps." When she finally pulled back, wiping her face with her hands, Zelda felt mortified. "I am sorry. I should not have. You are a stranger and you needed someone," Quentin said gently. "There is no shame in that. Grief is not meant to be carried alone." Zelda looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine concern and understanding in his gray eyes. He had a good face, she thought, weathered and honest, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun and smiling at the world. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet strength, that made her feel like maybe she was not entirely alone in the world after all. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what your kindness means to me." "I think I have some idea." Quentin gave her a small, sad smile. "I lost someone once too. My wife, Sarah. She died of pneumonia 3 years back. There were people who said I should have gotten the doctor sooner, that I should have done more. Grief is hard enough without others making it harder, so I understand a little of what you are going through." They sat together beneath the cottonwoods, until the sun climbed higher in the sky, talking in quiet voices about loss and loneliness and the cruelty of the world. Quentin told her about Sarah, about their 2 years of marriage and how bright she had been, how her laughter had filled their little cabin. Zelda told him about her parents, about how she had thought marrying Quinn would give her a new family, a place to belong, only to discover that love could be conditional and security could vanish like smoke. Finally, reluctantly, Zelda knew she had to go back. The chores would be waiting and Quinn would wonder where she had gone. She stood, brushing off her skirt, and Quentin stood with her. "Will you be all right?" he asked, concern still evident in his expression. "I do not know," Zelda answered honestly, "but I will manage. I always do." "If you need anything," Quentin said slowly, "or if you just need someone to talk to, I am often working this section of fence. I come by here most days around mid-morning. You would be welcome to come back. Just to talk, I mean, so you do not have to carry everything alone. Zelda felt something warm kindle in her chest, a tiny spark of hope or comfort, or maybe just the relief of knowing one person in the world did not think she was worthless. "Thank you, Quentin. I may take you up on that." She walked back to the ranch house, and though her circumstances had not changed, she felt fractionally less alone than she had that morning. Over the next week, she found herself returning to the creek in the late mornings when Quinn was out working and the house felt too empty and oppressive. Quentin was always there, working on the fence or checking cattle, and he would stop and sit with her beneath the cottonwoods, and they would talk. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after the war between the states, about learning the cattle business from the ground up. She told him about her childhood in a small town in Arkansas, about her parents' store, about the dreams she had once had of a big family and a home filled with love and laughter. They talked about books and horses, and the way the prairie looked when thunderstorms rolled across it. They did not talk about Quinn, or about the fact that Zelda was a married woman spending time alone with another man. That reality hung unspoken between them, acknowledged but not addressed. Zelda knew it was improper, knew she should not be seeking comfort from a man who was not her husband. But Quinn had abandoned her emotionally, had left her adrift and alone, and Quentin's friendship was the only thing keeping her from drowning in despair. He made her feel human again, made her feel like she mattered, like her grief was valid and her pain was real. He listened when she talked and understood when she could not find words. He made her laugh occasionally with dry observations about ornery cattle and stubborn horses, and those moments of laughter felt like miracles after weeks of sorrow. One morning in early May, Zelda arrived at the creek to find Quentin already there, standing and staring out over the water with his hands in his pockets. He turned when he heard her approach, and the look on his face was troubled. "What is wrong?" Zelda asked immediately. Quentin was quiet for a moment, then said, "I heard talk in town yesterday about your husband meeting with a lawyer, about annulment proceedings." The words hit Zelda like a physical blow. She had known it was coming, had heard Margaret plant the seed, but having it confirmed made it terribly, horribly real. She sank down onto their usual log, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "So it is really happening," she whispered. "He is going to cast me aside." Quentin sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I am sorry, Zelda. You deserve better than this. You deserve someone who will stand by you through hard times, not run at the first sign of trouble." "I failed him," Zelda said dully. "I could not give him a child." "Maybe he is right to want someone else." "No." Quentin's voice was sharp, and he turned to face her fully. "No, you listen to me. Losing a child is not failure, it is tragedy. It happens to good women and bad women, to strong women and weak women. It is not punishment, and it is not your fault. And any man who would blame you for it, who would abandon you in your grief, is not worthy of you." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks again. She seemed to do nothing but cry these days. "I have nowhere to go, Quentin. I have no family, no money of my own. If Quinn casts me out, I will have nothing." "You will not be alone." Quentin reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "I know it is not proper for me to say this. I know you are still a married woman, but I need you to know that you have a friend in me. More than a friend, if you will have me. These past weeks, talking with you, being near you, I have felt something I did not think I would feel again after Sarah died. You make me want to believe in second chances." Zelda stared at him, her heart pounding. She felt it too, that connection, that growing warmth every time she saw him. But the guilt was enormous. "I am married," she whispered. "It is wrong." "Your husband is divorcing you," Quentin said gently. "And even before that, he failed you in every way that matters. I am not asking you to do anything improper, Zelda. I am just asking you to know that when you are free, if you want a new start, I would be honored to be part of it. I care about you. I think I am falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that before you start believing you have no future." The declaration hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Zelda's mind spun with 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 fears and hopes and desperate longings. She looked at Quentin, at his honest gray eyes and his kind face, and felt her damaged heart begin to tentatively reach toward the possibility of healing. "I care about you too," she admitted, the words barely audible. "More than I should. You have been the only light in these dark weeks." "But I am afraid, Quentin, afraid of what people will say, afraid of making another mistake, afraid of losing you too." "I am not going anywhere," Quentin said firmly. He squeezed her hand. "I am right here, and I will be here as long as you need me. We will face whatever comes together." They sat together in silence, hands clasped, and Zelda felt something inside her shift and settle. She was still grieving, still hurt, still facing an uncertain and frightening future. But she was not alone anymore. She had Quentin, and that made all the difference. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn barely spoke to Zelda at all. He spent his days out on the range and his evenings at the saloon in Desdemona, and the house felt like a tomb. Zelda went through the motions of cooking and cleaning, but her heart was not in it. Her heart was with Quentin at the creek, in those stolen morning hours when they sat together and talked about everything and nothing. They were careful not to do anything that could be called improper. They did not embrace beyond that first time when Quentin had comforted her. They did not kiss, though Zelda found herself thinking about it more and more. They just talked and existed in each other's presence, and that was enough. It had to be enough, because Zelda was still technically married, and neither of them wanted to give Quinn any ammunition if the annulment proceedings went forward. Then one evening in late May, Quinn came home from town with his mother in tow and called Zelda into the parlor. She went with her heart hammering, knowing what was coming. Margaret stood by the window with her arms crossed, triumph in her eyes. Quinn stood in the center of the room, not looking at Zelda, twisting his hat in his hands exactly as he had the night she lost the baby. "I have spoken with a lawyer," Quinn said, his voice flat. "He says we have grounds for annulment based on your inability to fulfill the marital contract. You have failed to produce children, and the lawyer believes we can make a case for barrenness." "I was only pregnant once," Zelda said, trying to keep her voice steady. "One miscarriage does not make me barren. The doctor said—" "The doctor said you were careless," Margaret interrupted. "Working when you should have been resting, taking unnecessary risks. My son deserves a wife who can give him healthy children, and you have proven you cannot do that." "That is not fair," Zelda protested, looking at Quinn, willing him to meet her eyes. "Please, Quinn, we could try again. Give it time. Do not throw away our marriage over one loss." But Quinn just shook his head. "My mind is made up. The papers will be drawn up by the end of the week. You have until then to gather your things and make arrangements to leave. The house and all property will remain with me, of course. You came into this marriage with nothing, and that is what you will leave with." The casual cruelty of it stole Zelda's breath. She stood there staring at the man she had married, the man she had loved, and saw a stranger. "What happened to you?" she whispered. "You were kind once. You made me believe you loved me." For just a moment, something flickered in Quinn's eyes, regret maybe, or shame. But then Margaret made a sharp sound of disapproval and his face hardened again. "Things change. People change. This is for the best." Zelda turned and walked out of the room, her back straight and her head high, though inside she was crumbling. She went to the bedroom that had once been hers and Quinn's and closed the door, leaning against it and trying to breathe through the panic. She had known it was coming, but the reality was still devastating. In a week, she would be homeless, penniless, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to except Quentin. Quentin had said he would be there. Quentin had said he cared for her. But could she really go to him? Could she really throw herself on his mercy like that? It seemed like too much to ask, too much of a burden to place on a man she had known for only a few weeks. But what choice did she have? The next morning, Zelda slipped out early and made her way to the creek. Quentin was already there, and the moment he saw her face he knew something had happened. He strode toward her with concern written in every line of his body. "What is it? What has happened?" "Quinn is annulling the marriage," Zelda said, her voice shaking. "I have 1 week to leave. He is taking everything, leaving me with nothing." She looked up at Quentin, fear and hope warring in her chest. "I have nowhere to go, no money, no family, nothing. I know I have no right to ask, but stop." Quentin took her hands, holding them tightly. "You do not even need to ask. You will come with me. I have a cabin on the Morrison property, small but sturdy. There is room for you. You can stay as long as you need until you figure out what you want to do next." "People will talk," Zelda whispered. "They will say terrible things. Let them talk." Quentin's jaw was set, determined. "I do not care what people say. I care about you being safe and cared for. But Zelda, I need you to understand something. I am not offering this just as charity or friendship. I meant what I said before. I am in love with you. If you come with me, I want the chance to court you properly once the annulment is final. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life with you." Zelda felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in weeks, they were not entirely tears of grief. There was hope mixed in, fragile and tentative but real. "I do not deserve you," she said. "I am broken, Quentin. I lost a baby. I might not be able to give you children either." "Then we will face that together if it happens," Quentin said firmly. "But I do not believe you are broken, Zelda. You are grieving and you have been treated abominably, but you are not broken. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and I would be honored to have you in my life with or without children. I want you, just you." The words wrapped around Zelda's battered heart like a warm blanket. She looked into Quentin's gray eyes and saw only sincerity and love and unwavering commitment. He meant every word. He truly wanted her, flaws and grief and uncertain fertility and all. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come with you. And yes, when the annulment is final, I will let you court me. Because I am falling in love with you too, Quentin Walker, and you make me believe that maybe I can be happy again." Quentin smiled then, a brilliant expression that transformed his weathered face, and he pulled her into his arms. This time when he held her, it was not just comfort, it was promise. Zelda wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, feeling like she had finally found a safe harbor after weeks of drowning. The next week was a blur of tense silences and cold stares at the Whitmore ranch. Zelda packed her meager belongings, the few dresses she owned, her mother's Bible, a handful of personal items. Quinn and Margaret watched her like hawks, as if they expected her to steal the silver on her way out. Zelda kept her head high and her mouth shut, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down. On her last day, she cleaned the house one final time, not because Quinn deserved it, but because she wanted to leave with her dignity intact. She made the bed with fresh linens, washed the dishes, swept the floors. Margaret sat in the parlor the entire time, monitoring her movements, making pointed comments about how she hoped Quinn's next wife would be more appreciative of what she had. Zelda ignored her. She was done caring what Margaret Whitmore thought. That evening, as the sun was setting, Zelda walked out of the ranch house for the last time. She carried one small carpet bag that held everything she owned in the world. Quinn was on the porch, watching her leave with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Zelda thought he might say something, an apology, a goodbye, some acknowledgement of what they had shared and lost. But he just stood there silent, and Zelda turned away without a word. She walked across the prairie toward the Morrison property as twilight gathered around her. Her legs were tired and her heart was heavy, but there was also a strange sense of relief. She was free. The marriage that had become a prison was over, and ahead of her lay possibility. Quentin was waiting for her at the property line, sitting on his horse with another horse saddled beside him. When he saw her, he dismounted and came to meet her, taking her bag and tying it to the saddle. "Ready?" he asked gently. "Ready," Zelda said. He helped her mount, then swung up onto his own horse, and they rode together through the gathering darkness toward his cabin. It was a few miles from the main ranch house, tucked into a grove of oak trees near a spring. Small, as he had said, just 2 rooms and a loft, but solidly built and well-maintained. Quentin helped her down and led her inside, lighting a lantern that filled the space with warm, golden light. It was simple but clean, with a stove and a table and a rocking chair by the fireplace. There were books on a shelf and curtains at the windows, and it felt more like a home than the Whitmore ranch ever had. "The bedroom is yours," Quentin said, gesturing to one of the doors. "I will sleep in the loft. I want you to feel safe here, Zelda. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." Zelda looked around, taking it all in, and felt emotion well up in her throat. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you for giving me a place to land." "Thank you for trusting me enough to come here," Quentin replied. He smiled at her, that warm, gentle smile that made her heart skip. "Now you must be exhausted. There is food in the pantry if you are hungry and water in the pitcher by the bed. Tomorrow we can talk about what comes next, but tonight, just rest. You are safe here." Zelda nodded, suddenly overwhelmed with fatigue. She retreated to the small bedroom, which held a narrow bed with a colorful quilt and a trunk at the foot. She undressed mechanically, put on her nightgown, and crawled beneath the covers. Through the closed door, she could hear Quentin moving around in the main room, the soft sounds of him banking the fire and putting things away for the night. She fell asleep feeling safer than she had in months. The annulment was finalized 3 weeks later. The lawyer in Desdemona handled it quietly, and Quinn paid him well to make sure the paperwork went through without complications. Zelda signed where she was told to sign, her hand steady, her face calm. She felt nothing as she watched the lawyer blot the ink and stack the papers. The marriage had died long before the legal documents caught up with reality. She walked out of the lawyer's office a free woman, and Quentin was waiting for her outside, leaning against the hitching post with his hat pulled low against the bright June sun. He straightened when he saw her, searching her face. "How are you?" he asked. "I am fine," Zelda said, and realized it was true. She was not happy, not yet, but she was no longer drowning in despair. "It is over, officially, legally over." Quentin nodded slowly. "Then I have a question to ask you if you are ready to hear it." "What question?" He took her hand, right there on the main street of Desdemona, not caring who saw. "Zelda Sanders, would you allow me to court you? Properly, with honorable intentions and the goal of marriage if we find we suit each other. I know you have been through hell, and I know you need time to heal, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I love you and I want to build a life with you." Zelda felt a smile tug at her lips, the first genuine smile in what felt like forever. "Yes, Quentin Walker. I would be honored to be courted by you." They rode back to the cabin together, and that evening Quentin cooked dinner steaks from a steer he had slaughtered and potatoes from his garden. They ate at the small table, talking easily, and afterward they sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. Quentin told her about his plans for the future. about his dream of one day having his own small spread instead of just working for the Morrisons. Zelda told him about her childhood dreams of teaching school, a dream she had set aside when her parents died and survival became more important than ambition. "You could still teach," Quentin said thoughtfully. "Desdemona needs a school teacher. The last one moved east last year, and the children have been learning at home since then. If you wanted, you could talk to the town council about the position." Zelda felt a spark of interest kindle in her chest. "You really think they would consider me?" "With my reputation, with the annulment, your reputation is that you were mistreated by your husband and his family after suffering a tragedy," Quentin said firmly. "Anyone with sense knows you did nothing wrong, and you are educated, well-spoken, and patient. You would make an excellent teacher." The idea took root in Zelda's mind and began to grow. A purpose, a way to support herself, a path forward that was not entirely dependent on Quentin's charity. "I will think about it," she said. "Maybe I will talk to the council next week." Over the following weeks and months, Zelda and Quentin's relationship deepened and blossomed. He courted her with old-fashioned gentleness, bringing her wildflowers from the prairie and taking her on long rides to show her the beautiful corners of the countryside. They attended church socials together, and though there were whispers and sideways glances from some of the townspeople, there were also nods of approval from others who had heard the truth about how the Whitmores had treated her. Zelda did speak to the town council, and to her surprise and delight, they offered her the teaching position starting in the fall. It did not pay much, but it was honest work and it was hers. She threw herself into preparing, reading every educational text she could get her hands on, planning lessons and organizing the small schoolhouse. Through it all, Quentin was her steady support. He built her a bookshelf for her growing collection of teaching materials. He repaired the schoolhouse roof when he heard it was leaking. He listened to her ideas and encouraged her dreams and made her feel valued and capable. And slowly, carefully, Zelda's heart began to heal. The grief over the lost baby would always be there, a scar she carried, but it no longer defined her entire existence. She laughed again, genuine laughter that came from a place of joy rather than bitterness. She made plans for the future with hope instead of dread. And she fell more deeply in love with Quentin Walker every single day. By autumn, when the leaves on the cottonwoods along the creek turned gold and the air carried a crisp coolness, Zelda knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to marry Quentin. She loved him completely, loved his kindness and his strength and his unwavering belief in her. He had seen her at her lowest and had not turned away. He had held her while she cried and had helped her rebuild herself into someone stronger. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Quentin turned to her with a nervous energy she had not seen before. "Zelda," he said, "I have been patient. I hope I have given you enough time to heal to be sure of what you want. But I cannot wait any longer to ask, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, build a life with me, grow old with me?" Zelda's heart soared. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Quentin, I will marry you. I love you and I want nothing more than to be your wife." Quentin pulled her into his arms and kissed her then. A deep, passionate kiss that spoke of months of restrained longing and a future full of promise. Zelda kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that moment, feeling like she had finally, truly come home. They were married in November, a simple ceremony at the church in Desdemona with just a few close friends in attendance. Zelda wore a new dress of deep blue that Quentin had bought for her, and she carried a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. Quentin wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes shining with love as he watched her walk down the aisle toward him. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Quentin kissed her, Zelda felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership, respect, love that did not waver in hard times. This was the future she had dreamed of, and it was finally, miraculously hers. They held a small reception at the cabin, with food and music and dancing. Zelda laughed as Quentin spun her around the yard, his arms strong and sure around her, and she thought about how far she had come. A year ago, she had been broken and hopeless, cast aside and alone. Now she was married to a man who cherished her, teaching children and making a difference in the community, building a life that was full and meaningful. That night, after the guests had gone home and they were alone in the cabin, Quentin carried Zelda over the threshold of what was now their bedroom. He laid her gently on the bed and looked down at her with such tenderness that it made her chest ache. "I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are," he promised. "You are everything to me, Zelda. Everything." "And you are everything to me," Zelda whispered back. She reached up to cup his face, tracing the lines around his eyes with gentle fingers. "You saved me, Quentin. You held me when I was broken and helped me become whole again. I will love you until the day I die." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, sealing their vows in the most intimate way, and Zelda felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks because she had never imagined she could be this happy, this complete. The months passed in a blur of contentment. Zelda loved teaching, loved watching the children learn and grow under her guidance. Quentin continued working for the Morrisons but was saving money toward his dream of buying his own land. They made plans together, dreamed together, built a life together. And then, in the spring of 1883, just over a year after she had lost her first baby, Zelda realized she was pregnant again. The discovery filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She wanted this baby desperately, wanted to give Quentin a child and prove that she could carry a pregnancy to term. But the fear was enormous. The memory of that previous loss still raw despite the healing that had happened around it. She told Quentin one evening as they were preparing dinner, her hands shaking as she chopped vegetables. He went very still, then set down the pot he was holding and came to her, turning her to face him. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice careful. "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I feel the same way I felt before, that strange tiredness and sensitivity. But Quentin, I am so afraid. What if I lose this baby too? What if—" "Stop." Quentin took her face in his hands, making her look at him. "We will not borrow trouble from tomorrow. Right now, today, you are pregnant and everything is fine. We will take it one day at a time, and I will be with you every step of the way. If something goes wrong, God forbid, we will face it together. But I believe with all my heart that this baby is going to be fine, and you are going to be fine, and we are going to be parents." Zelda nodded, trying to absorb his calm certainty. "I am still scared. I know, but you are also strong, stronger than you know, and you are not alone this time. I am here, and I am not going anywhere." Over the next months, Quentin was true to his word. He insisted that Zelda rest more, and he took over many of the heavier household chores. He walked her to and from the schoolhouse every day, not because she was incapable, but because he wanted to be near her, wanted to make sure she was all right. He rubbed her feet when they ached and brought her ginger tea when morning sickness made her queasy. He talked to her belly at night, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the horses and how much he was looking forward to meeting them. The pregnancy progressed without incident. Zelda saw a doctor, Patterson, regularly, and though she tensed every time waiting for bad news, the doctor always smiled and told her everything looked healthy. As her belly grew and she felt the baby move inside her, Zelda began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was really going to happen. She worked at the schoolhouse through the early autumn, finally stepping down in October when her pregnancy became too advanced to comfortably manage a room full of energetic children. The town council understood and assured her the position would be waiting for her when she was ready to return. In November, as the weather turned cold and the first frost touched the prairie grass, Zelda went into labor. It was evening and Quentin was home, thank God, because the contractions came on fast and hard. He rode like hell to fetch Dr. Patterson and the midwife, Mrs. Brennan, then stayed by Zelda's side through the entire ordeal. Labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Zelda was sure she could not do it, when the pain was too much and the fear too great. But Quentin held her hand and wiped her brow and told her she was doing beautifully, that she was strong, that he loved her. And when she was ready to give up, he looked her in the eyes and said, "You can do this. Our baby needs you to do this. I know you are tired, but you are the strongest woman I have ever known and you can do this." So Zelda gathered her strength and pushed, and finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "It is a boy, Doctor," Patterson announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, strong boy." Quentin let out a shout of joy, and Zelda burst into tears, reaching for her son. The doctor laid him in her arms, and she stared down at his tiny red face, his miniature fingers and toes, his shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand to a size she had not known was possible. "Hello, sweet boy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one. We have been waiting for you." Quentin leaned over, his own eyes wet, and kissed Zelda's forehead, then gently touched the baby's cheek. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You did it, Zelda. You brought our son into the world. I am so proud of you." They named him Thomas, after Quentin's father, and he was indeed perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs, and his father's gray eyes. Zelda spent the first weeks after his birth in a haze of exhausted joy, nursing and rocking and staring at her son in wonder. Quentin was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night when he was fussy. He sang to him and told him stories and looked at him with such love that it made Zelda fall even more deeply in love with her husband. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, Zelda felt ready to return to teaching part-time. Mrs. Morrison, the rancher's wife, offered to watch Thomas during the mornings, and Zelda gratefully accepted. She loved her son more than life itself, but she also loved teaching, and finding a balance between the two made her feel fulfilled in a way she had not anticipated. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Quentin continued working the cattle, saving every spare penny toward buying their own land. Zelda taught and cared for Thomas and made their small cabin into a warm, loving home. They went to church on Sundays and attended town socials, and slowly became a respected part of the Desdemona community. On one of those Sundays, as they were leaving the church, Zelda saw Quinn across the street. He was with a woman she did not recognize, young and pretty, clearly pregnant. Margaret was with them, looking smug. Quinn glanced up and met Zelda's eyes for just a moment, and in that moment, Zelda saw regret, but she felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, not even satisfaction at seeing that he had moved on. Quinn was part of her past, a painful chapter that was closed. Her present and her future were with Quentin and Thomas, with the life they were building together, and she would not trade it for anything in the world. Quentin touched her elbow gently. "You all right?" he asked, following her gaze. "I am more than all right," Zelda said, smiling up at him. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be." 2 years later, in the spring of 1886, Quentin came home with news that made Zelda's heart leap. The Morrisons were selling off a portion of their land, and Quentin had saved enough to make an offer on 100 acres. It was not enormous, but it was theirs, a place to build their future and raise their family. "We can build a real house," Quentin said, excitement making him talk faster than usual. "A proper house with multiple bedrooms and a big kitchen for you. We can run a small herd, maybe some chickens and pigs. It will be hard work, but it will be ours, Zelda, our own place." Zelda threw her arms around him, laughing. "Yes, oh yes, let us do it." They broke ground on the house in May, and by autumn they had moved in. It was a beautiful structure, simple but solid, with 3 bedrooms and a wide front porch and windows that let in the morning light. Thomas, now 3 years old, ran through the rooms shrieking with delight, and Zelda stood in the center of what would be her kitchen and felt tears of gratitude prick her eyes. This was her home. Not a place she had married into and could be cast out of, but a place she and Quentin had built together with their own hands and sweat and dreams. It was theirs, absolutely and irrevocably. That Christmas, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. The news filled her with the same complicated mix of joy and fear as the first time. But this pregnancy was easier emotionally, because she had Thomas as proof that her body could do this, that she could carry a child to term. Their daughter was born in July of 1887, a hot Texas summer bringing forth a tiny, perfect girl with Zelda's dark hair and Quentin's gray eyes. They named her Sarah, after Quentin's first wife, and Zelda held no jealousy about it. Sarah had been part of Quentin's past, part of what made him the man he was, and Zelda was glad to honor her memory. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and help care for her. Quentin doted on both his children, and Zelda watched him play with them in the evenings and felt her heart could not possibly hold any more happiness. But life was not without its challenges. The ranch was hard work, and there were years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. Thomas got sick with fever one terrible winter, and Zelda sat up with him for 3 days straight, praying desperately that she would not lose him. He recovered, but the scare left her shaken. Through it all, she and Quentin faced everything together. They talked through problems and made decisions as partners. They supported each other's dreams and comforted each other's fears. They argued sometimes, because they were both stubborn and passionate people, but they always made up before bed, always remembered that they were on the same side. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Thomas started school, and Sarah followed a few years later. Zelda returned to teaching full-time once both children were in school, and she loved watching them learn alongside the other students. Quentin's ranch prospered, slowly but steadily, and he hired a couple of hands to help with the work. In 1892, when Thomas was 9 and Sarah was 5, Zelda gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Simon. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth even more so, but both babies came into the world healthy and howling. Quentin took one look at his wife, exhausted but triumphant, and said, "You are a miracle, Zelda Walker. An absolute miracle." With 4 children, life became even more chaotic and full. The house rang with laughter and arguments and the constant noise of a large family. Zelda and Quentin fell into bed exhausted every night, but they would not have changed it for anything. One evening, when the twins were about a year old and finally sleeping through the night, Zelda and Quentin found themselves alone on the porch for the first time in what felt like months. They sat side by side in the rocking chairs, watching the sun set over their land, and Quentin reached over and took Zelda's hand. "You ever think about how far we have come?" he asked quietly. Zelda looked over at him, at the silver starting to thread through his brown hair, at the deeper lines around his eyes, at the face she loved more than any other in the world. "All the time," she said. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life. That I have you, that I have our children, that I have this home. After everything that happened, after how dark things were, I never imagined I could be this happy." "I think about that day I found you crying by the creek," Quentin said. "How broken you seemed, how much pain you were in. I just wanted to help, but I never imagined I would fall in love with you, that you would become my whole world." "You saved me," Zelda said softly. "You held me when I needed it most, and you helped me believe I could have a future. I will never forget that, Quentin. Never." "We saved each other," Quentin corrected. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I was half alive after Sarah died, just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to feel again, to hope again. You gave me a family and a purpose. Everything good in my life comes from you." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear the children playing before bedtime, Thomas reading to Sarah, the twins babbling to each other in their cribs. It was the sound of home, of love, of a life well lived. Zelda leaned her head on Quentin's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They rocked gently together, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and had built something beautiful out of pain and loss and unwavering love. "I love you," Zelda whispered. "I love you too," Quentin replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of our lives." And as the years continued to unfold, that promise held true. They raised their 4 children with love and discipline and laughter. They watched Thomas grow into a fine young man who took over the ranch operations, saw Sarah become a teacher like her mother, and saw the twins develop their own distinct personalities and dreams. They grew old together, Quentin and Zelda, their love deepening with each passing year. They sat on the porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, and they talked about everything and nothing. They attended their children's weddings and welcomed grandchildren with joy. They faced illnesses and setbacks and the inevitable sorrows of life, but they faced them together, always together. And when Zelda thought back to that terrible time after her miscarriage, when she had lost everything and felt so utterly alone, she was grateful for the pain because it had led her here. To Quentin, to their children, to this life that was richer and fuller than anything she could have imagined. She had been broken, and Quentin had let her cry and held her close, and from that moment of compassion and connection had grown a love that sustained them through everything. It was not the life she had planned, but it was so much better than anything she had dreamed. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The house was full of family and friends, of music and food and celebration. Quentin pulled Zelda outside for a moment of quiet, away from the noise and chaos, and they stood together under the stars just as they had so many times before. 25 years, Quentin mused. Where did the time go? "Into building this," Zelda said, gesturing back at the house full of people they loved. "Into creating something that will last long after we are gone." Quentin turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Even after 25 years, even with gray in both their hair and lines on both their faces, Zelda still felt her heart skip when he looked at her like that. "I would do it all again," he said seriously. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, as long as it was with you." "Me too," Zelda whispered. "Every single moment." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Zelda felt 17 again, full of hope and possibility. They had built a good life together, a life rooted in love and respect and partnership. Their children were happy and healthy, their ranch was prosperous, their community was strong. They had weathered every storm together and had emerged not just intact but thriving. As they walked back inside to rejoin the party, Zelda sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. For Quentin, who had seen her at her lowest and had loved her anyway. For their children, each one a precious gift. For this life they had built from the ashes of her first broken marriage. For second chances and new beginnings and the healing power of love. The party continued late into the night, and when the last guest had finally left and the children had gone to their own homes, Quentin and Zelda stood together washing dishes in comfortable silence. It was a mundane task, but Zelda found joy in it because she was doing it with him, because this was their life, their home, their love. As they climbed into bed that night, Quentin pulled her close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was where she belonged. After all the pain and loss and struggle, she had found her home not in a place but in a person, in the cowboy who had let her cry and held her close and had never let go. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Quentin asked sleepily. "For everything, for loving me, for giving me this life, for being exactly who you are." She felt him smile against her hair. "Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me, for building this beautiful life with me. I am the luckiest man alive." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had for 25 years, and just as they would for all the years to come. Their love story had begun in grief and hardship, but it had blossomed into something extraordinary. They had proven that second chances were real, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the worst moments of life could lead to the very best. In the end, Zelda and Quentin Walker lived long, happy lives surrounded by children and grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. They never forgot the hard times that had brought them together, but they chose to focus on all the good that had come from it. Their ranch became a gathering place for family, a symbol of love and perseverance, and the power of choosing each other every single day. And when they were very old, sitting on that same porch in their rocking chairs, still holding hands after more than 50 years of marriage, Zelda looked at Quentin and said what she had said 1,000 times before, but never grew tired of saying, "I love you, Quentin Walker." And Quentin, with the same devotion he had shown her from that very first day by the creek, squeezed her hand and replied, "I love you too, Zelda Walker, forever and always." Their story was one of redemption and healing, of finding light in darkness and building hope from despair. It was a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest loves come not despite our brokenness, but because of it, when we find someone willing to hold us while we cry and help us become whole again. And that kind of love, born in compassion and nurtured through years of partnership and devotion, was the kind that lasted a lifetime and beyond.